The glass shattered at 2:47 in the morning. Marcus Hale stood barefoot in the hallway of his $40 million penthouse, chest heaving, a broken whiskey tumbler at his feet, and his own reflection staring back at him from the floor-to-ceiling mirror on the wall, except the reflection was not doing what he was doing. Marcus was standing completely still. But the reflection had its hand raised. He blinked. The reflection blinked back. Hand down. Perfectly in sync again. Marcus pressed his palm flat against his chest and told himself it was the whiskey. It was always the whiskey. Marcus Hale was the kind of man people wrote magazine covers about. Self-made by 31. $1 billion by 35. By 42, he owned 3 private jets, a stake in 2 professional sports teams, and a penthouse that sat so high above New York City that on foggy nights, he was literally above the clouds. He had built his empire from nothing, from a 1-bedroom apartment in Detroit where the radiator barely worked and dinner was sometimes crackers and whatever his mother could stretch from a tin of soup. He had clawed his way up with his bare hands, and he had the scars on his knuckles to prove it. Metaphorically. Mostly. The people who worked for him respected him. The people who competed against him feared him. And the people who loved him, well, there weren't many of those left. His ex-wife Elena had told him, on the night she walked out, "Marcus, you don't have a life. You have a brand." He had not argued. He had simply watched her go, then turned back to his laptop and sent 17 emails before midnight. That was 3 years ago. He had not thought about her much since then. He told himself that too. The mirror incident, that is what he called it in the days that followed, the mirror incident was easy to dismiss. Stress. Exhaustion. The Nakamura acquisition was eating him alive, his board was breathing down his neck, and he had slept maybe 4 hours in the last 3 days. He had the broken glass cleaned up, poured a fresh drink, and went back to bed. He did not sleep. 2 nights later, it happened again. He was standing in his bathroom, tie loosened, splashing cold water on his face before a midnight call with his legal team in Tokyo. He looked up into the mirror above the sink. His reflection looked back. And then, slowly enough that at first Marcus thought it was a trick of the light, his reflection tilted its head to the right. Marcus had not moved. He gripped the edge of the sink. His knuckles went white. He stared. The reflection stared back, head slightly tilted, with an expression on its face that Marcus did not recognize as his own. It was not blank the way his face felt blank. It looked sad. Deeply, quietly, unbearably sad. "What?" Marcus whispered. The reflection straightened, blinked, and then it was just him again, looking pale and wild-eyed into a perfectly ordinary mirror. He canceled the Tokyo call. He sat on the edge of his bathtub for 40 minutes, not moving, not thinking, just sitting. That was unusual for Marcus Hale. Marcus Hale did not sit and do nothing. Marcus Hale did not let anything slow him down. But something about those eyes, his eyes, but not his eyes, had reached inside his chest and grabbed something. He told his assistant Daniel the next morning to have all the mirrors in the penthouse inspected. "Smart glass," he said. "Glitches." Daniel nodded and made the calls. The technicians came, ran their diagnostics, found nothing, and left. The mirrors were perfectly ordinary mirrors. Marcus stood in front of the hallway mirror that evening and crossed his arms. "Fine," he said out loud, feeling ridiculous. "Fine. Let's see it then." The reflection crossed its arms. Normal. Synchronized. Boring. He laughed at himself. He went to bed. He almost believed it was over. It was not over. 3 days later, he was hosting a dinner. 12 people, a private chef, the kind of evening where every bottle of wine cost more than most people's monthly rent. He was mid-sentence, telling a story about a deal he'd closed in Singapore, when he glanced sideways at the large ornate mirror on the dining room wall. He saw his reflection in the background of the glass, slightly behind and to the left of where he stood. His reflection was not telling a story. His reflection was sitting down at the empty end of the table with its head in its hands. Marcus stopped talking, mid-sentence. The entire table went quiet. "Marcus," said his business partner Grayson. "You all right?" Marcus looked again. The reflection was standing, gesturing, telling the Singapore story. Just like him. Everything normal. "Fine," he said. "Sorry. Thought I forgot something." He laughed, the table laughed, the dinner moved on. But he did not touch his wine for the rest of the evening. After the guests left, he stood alone in the dining room. The chef was gone. Daniel was gone. The city hummed 40 floors below, indifferent and enormous. Marcus walked to the mirror slowly, the way a man approaches something he is not sure is dangerous. His reflection walked toward him too. They stopped at the same time. A foot from the glass. Face to face. And then Marcus said something he had not planned to say. Something that came up from somewhere deep and old and unexamined. "What do you want?" For a long moment, nothing. Just two men in a mirror, breathing. And then the reflection raised one hand and pressed it flat against the inside of the glass. Marcus stared at that hand. His hand. But not his hand. He had not lifted a finger. Against every rational instinct he had, against every cold and logical fiber of the man he had built himself into, Marcus Hale reached out and pressed his palm against the glass. It was warm. He snatched his hand back. His heart was hammering so loud he could hear it in his ears. He stood there, shaking, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Marcus Hale felt something crack open inside him. Not the mirror. Himself. Because the reflection was crying. Not performing tears. Not dramatic sobbing. Just standing there with wet cheeks and that devastating quiet sadness, looking at Marcus with his own eyes, and Marcus suddenly knew, with the kind of knowing that lives below thought and language, exactly what this was. Exactly who this was. This was the version of him that had felt things. The version that had loved Elena and let her go without a fight. The version that had missed his mother's last birthday because of a shareholders meeting and had told himself she understood. The version that had once had a best friend named Ray who'd called one December night needing help and Marcus had been too busy, too important, too untouchable to answer. Ray had not called again after that. This was everything Marcus had locked away, built walls around, buried under acquisitions and altitude and the clean, anesthetic smell of success. His reflection pressed both hands against the glass now. Not threatening, not angry, just desperate to be seen. "I know," Marcus whispered. His voice broke on the two words. "I know. I'm sorry." He did not sleep that night either. But it was different this time. He lay in the dark and let himself think about Ray. About Elena. About his mother, who was still alive and lived 40 minutes away in New Jersey and whom he had not visited in 4 months. He let it all the way in, the grief and the guilt and the hollow, expensive loneliness of the life he had constructed, and he let it hurt the way it had always deserved to hurt. In the morning, he called his mother before the markets opened. She answered on the second ring, surprised and then not surprised, because mothers never really stop waiting. He told her he was coming for Sunday dinner. She said she would make the soup. The real kind, not from a tin. He stood in front of the hallway mirror before he left for the office. His reflection stood back, still, synchronized. Just a man in a very expensive suit, looking a little older than he remembered, a little more tired, a little more real. But the eyes were different now. They were his.